Hello, my dear friends. Today, I want to share with you the story of a man who changed the way the world thinks. A man whose wisdom still shines after more than 2,000 years. His name was Socrates. He lived in ancient Greece long before our time. Yet his ideas about truth, knowledge, and the human soul still guide millions today. Socrates never wrote books. He never started a school. He didn't chase wealth, fame, or power, but he left behind something far greater. A way of thinking that teaches us how to find truth by asking questions. This story is not only about a philosopher. It's about a teacher of life. A man who showed that wisdom begins not with answers, but with curiosity. So, take a deep breath, relax your mind, and let us travel back in time to the streets of ancient Athens, where a man named Socrates began to change the world with nothing but his words. Socrates was born around 470 BC in the city of Athens, Greece, one of the greatest cities of its time. Athens was full of art, temples, music, and people who loved to talk about ideas. But Socrates himself was a very simple man. He was not rich. He often walked barefoot through the streets. His clothes were plain, and he didn't care about fancy food or expensive things. He believed that true beauty came from within, from the soul, not from what we wear. People sometimes laughed at him because of his strange habits. He would stop anyone in the market, a politician, a soldier, a teacher, and begin asking questions. He wanted to understand what people believed and why they believed it. He never gave lectures. He just asked, "What is courage?" or "What is justice?" And then he would listen carefully to the answer. When people tried to explain, he asked more questions until they realized they didn't truly understand the thing they thought they knew. This way of learning and teaching became known as the Socratic method, the art of asking questions that lead to truth. Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing." At first, that sounds strange. How can a wise person say they know nothing? But what he meant was powerful. He believed that most people live with illusions. They think they know what is good, what is fair, what is true. But when asked to explain deeply, they realize their knowledge is only half true. Socrates believed wisdom begins when we recognize our ignorance. When you admit you don't know everything, you open your mind to learning. That's why he questioned everyone, not to embarrass them, but to help them see their own limits and grow beyond them. He said that truth lives inside each person's soul. The teacher's job is not to fill a student's mind with information, but to help the student give birth to their own understanding. Socrates used to compare himself to a midwife, someone who helps mothers deliver babies. He said his role was to help people give birth to wisdom from within their own minds. Isn't that beautiful? He wasn't forcing ideas. He was awakening them. Unlike other philosophers, Socrates never wrote a single word. Everything we know about him comes from his students, especially Plato, who loved and admired him deeply. Plato wrote dialogues, conversations that show Socrates talking with people about truth, justice, love, and virtue. Through these writings, Socrates' ideas lived on even after his death. He believed that writing could not capture real knowledge. He said words written on paper are like paintings. They look alive, but they cannot speak or answer back. He believed real understanding happens through living dialogue, by asking and answering questions face to face. That's why he spent his life walking around Athens, talking to anyone willing to think with him. He didn't care about titles or positions. To him, everyone, rich or poor, young or old, could discover wisdom if they were humble enough to seek it. Socrates had something very unique about him. He often spoke of an inner voice, a quiet guide that helped him make choices. He called it his daemonion, a kind of divine inner spirit. This voice, he said, never told him what to do. It only warned him what not to do. When he was about to make a wrong decision, the inner voice whispered, "Stop." Some people thought he was strange or even crazy because of this belief, but Socrates explained that everyone has a kind of inner guidance, a sense of right and wrong that speaks softly if we learn to listen. He encouraged others to connect with that inner wisdom, to live with self-control, integrity, and care for their soul. He believed that living a good life had nothing to do with wealth or power, but everything to do with the condition of your soul. If your soul is pure, your life will be peaceful. Socrates loved spending time with young people. He believed that the youth were full of curiosity and courage to think freely. Many young Athenians gathered around him, listening, asking questions, and learning how to think for themselves. But not everyone liked that. Some parents and politicians began to worry. They said, "Socrates is teaching our youth to question everything, even our traditions and beliefs." And they were partly right. Socrates did encourage young minds to question everything, including authority. He believed blind obedience was dangerous. He wanted people to use reason and conscience, not just follow orders or customs. To him, questioning was not disrespect. It was love for truth. He once said, "I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think." As his influence grew, so did his enemies. Some powerful men felt threatened by his words. They didn't like how he exposed their ignorance in public discussions. So one day, they decided to silence him. Socrates was accused of two things: corrupting the youth because he taught them to think independently, disrespecting the gods because he questioned old beliefs. He was taken to court before 500 citizens of Athens. There, standing barefoot and calm, Socrates defended himself with honesty and dignity. He didn't beg for mercy. He didn't try to please anyone. He said, "I would rather obey God than man." He told the judges that he had only one mission: to awaken the people of Athens, to help them care more about their souls than about wealth or reputation. He said, "You may kill me, but you will not harm me, for a good man cannot be harmed by evil." The court, however, found him guilty. The punishment, death by drinking poison hemlock. Even in his final hours, Socrates remained calm. His friends and students gathered around him, heartbroken. They begged him to escape, to run away before the execution. But Socrates refused. He said that to break the law, even unfair law, would go against his principles. He had spent his whole life teaching that a person must do what is right, even if it is difficult, and he wanted to die with the same integrity he had lived with. In his prison cell, he talked peacefully with his students about the soul, life, and death. He said that death is not something to fear. It's either a long, peaceful sleep or a new journey for the soul. He believed that the soul is immortal. It never dies. It simply moves on. When the moment came, he took the cup of poison in his hands, smiled softly, and drank it. He walked calmly until his legs grew weak, and then he lay down, surrounded by his friends. Socrates' death was not the end. It was the beginning of something much larger. It showed the world that truth is worth dying for. It proved that a man can be poor, simple, and powerless, yet more powerful than kings and armies. His student Plato went on to build a great school called the Academy, where he continued Socrates' teachings. And later, Plato's student Aristotle would teach Alexander the Great, spreading Greek philosophy across the world. So you see, one humble man's courage created a chain of wisdom that changed history. Even today, the Socratic method, asking questions instead of just memorizing answers, is used in classrooms, universities, and law schools all over the world. Socrates' philosophy was not about knowing facts, it was about knowing yourself. He said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." What does that mean? It means that if you live without thinking about who you are, why you act, and what you believe, then you are only existing, not truly living. He believed that every person should look inside themselves every day and ask, "Am I living rightly? Am I honest with myself? Do I know what I'm doing and why?" To Socrates, knowledge and virtue were one. He said, "To know the good is to do the good." If someone truly understands what is right, they will naturally do it. So evil, he believed, comes not from bad hearts, but from ignorance. That's why education for him was not about memorizing information. It was about awakening the soul. Today, we have technology, speed, and endless information. We can search for anything in seconds. Yet many people feel lost. We have more data, but less wisdom. What would Socrates say to us today? He would probably walk among us and ask, "What is happiness? What is success? What is truth?" He would ask us to stop running so fast and start thinking more deeply. He would remind us that wisdom doesn't come from the internet or books. It comes from reflection. If Socrates lived now, he would not be impressed by how much we know. He would ask how well we live. Are we kind? Are we honest? Do we use our knowledge to make life better for others? That's the spirit of his wisdom. Simple, deep, and timeless. Let's take a few quiet moments to understand what we can learn from Socrates' life. Be curious. Never stop asking questions. Every question brings you closer to truth. Be humble. Admit what you don't know. It's the first step to learning. Seek truth, not fame. What matters most is living rightly, not being admired. Listen to your inner voice. If something feels wrong deep inside, don't ignore it. Live with integrity. Do what's right, even when no one is watching. Value your soul. Money and success can be lost, but your soul is forever. Socrates showed us that a meaningful life is not about how long you live, but how deeply you live and how honestly you think. When Socrates drank the poison, he was not afraid. He believed that truth was more important than fear. And in that calm courage, he became eternal. He proved that no government, no power, no weapon can defeat a person who lives by truth. His body died, but his words live, reminding us that wisdom is stronger than time. There's a quiet beauty in that, because every one of us can be a little like Socrates. You don't need to be rich or famous. You just need to think honestly, live simply, and love truth deeply. When you do that, you too become a part of the same light, the light of wisdom that never fades. My dear friends, thank you for listening to this story. Socrates, the man who changed thinking. May it remind you that real knowledge is not in having all the answers, but in asking the right questions. May it teach you that a wise life is not about collecting things, but about understanding yourself. Remember, wisdom begins with humility, and peace begins with truth.